Elder Olson's essay, An Outline of Poetic Theory, argues for a flexible and pluralistic approach to literary criticism, rooted in Aristotle's ideas but updated for modern contexts. The essay begins by addressing the confusion caused by differing critical methods. Critics often clash because they assume their approach is the only valid one. Some dogmatically stick to their methods, others blend ideas carelessly, and skeptics dismiss all criticism as pointless. Olson warns that these attitudes stifle progress. Instead, he proposes pluralism, the idea that multiple critical methods can coexist if they address different questions or aspects of art. Just as philosophy has many valid schools, criticism can embrace diverse frameworks without contradiction as long as each method is logically consistent and suited to its specific goals. Central to Olson's argument is the idea that criticism is part of philosophy. Every theory of art reflects broader philosophical assumptions. For example, Plato and Aristotle developed distinct views of art based on their larger worldview. Critics must recognize their own assumptions and the limits of their methods. A critic focused on the product of art, for example, the poem itself, will ask different questions than one focused on the artist's intent or the audience's experience. These approaches are not conflicting, they are complementary. A poem can be analyzed as a crafted object, a window into the poet's mind, or a tool for provoking emotions, depending on the critic's focus. Olson then turns to Aristotle's Poetics, which he sees as a model for systematic criticism. Aristotle defines art as imitation, not mere copying, but the creative shaping of materials like words or paint to produce something new. A poem, like a chair, is an artificial object made for a purpose. Its beauty lies in its form, a unified, balanced whole where every part serves the work's emotional effect. For tragedy, this effect is catharsis, purging pity and fear. For comedy, it's laughter. He explains that each poetic form, tragedy, epic, lyric, has its own rules determined by its medium, that is, words, object, the action imitated, and manner, how it is presented, an emotional goal. Olson breaks down how critics analyze these elements. Take plot in tragedy. Aristotle calls it the soul of the work because it structures the hero's downfall. A good plot is logical with events connected by cause and effect and builds to a climax that triggers the audience's emotional release. Similarly, character must be believable and morally complex enough to earn the audience's empathy or judgment. Olson contrasts this with simplistic partial criticisms that fixate on one element like a poem's moral message while ignoring others. A holistic approach like Aristotle's examines how all parts, plot, character, diction, and thought interact to create the whole. Olson also tackles common poetic devices. Surprise and suspense, for instance, rely on manipulating audience expectations. A tragic twist, like Oedipus discovering his true identity, works because the audience infers one outcome but gets another. This emotional jolt depends on careful step up. Clues must be present but not obvious. Suspense arises when the audience knows enough to care about the outcome but not enough to predict it. Both devices require balancing clarity and mystery, a skill he ties to the poet's understanding of human psychology. The essay then addresses representation, what details a poem includes or omits. For example, gruesome acts in Greek tragedies like murders often happen offstage because showing them would disgust rather than move the audience. Instead, poets use language to evoke mental images, letting listeners imagine the horror without graphic details. Olson notes that vividness varies by medium. Drama shows action directly, while narrative poetry tells it requiring readers to visualize scenes, both methods can be effective if they align with the work's emotional goals. Olson applies these principles to specific poetic forms. He uses Yeats's Sailing to Byzantium as an example of a lyric poem. Unlike a tragedy, a lyric focuses on a single moment of moral choice. Conveyed through the speaker's voice, its beauty lies in the tight unity of thought, character, and diction. The words matter, but they are secondary to the act of choosing they depict. Olson argues that while diction, word choice, is crucial, good poems cannot exist without precise language. It is the least important element because it serves a higher purpose of revealing character and thought. The essay concludes by linking poetry's artistic value to its ethical power. Art shapes how we see the world. Olson argues by representing noble or flawed characters in vivid scenarios, poems train us to judge actions based on merit, not self interest. This moral influence is not didactic. Poetry does not preach, but emerges naturally from the emotional engagement great art provokes. A well crafted tragedy, for instance, does not tell us pride is bad, it makes us feel the devastation of hubris through the hero's downfall. Olson stresses that criticism must adapt to the work it analyzes. A one size fits all approach, like reducing all poetry to irony or symbolism, misses the richness of individual forms. Instead, critics should use Aristotle's framework as a starting point, adjusting their methods to fit the poem's unique goals. This does not mean abandoning rigor. Olson insists on clear definitions and logical coherence, but it does not require humility. Critics must acknowledge that no single method can explain everything and that understanding art demands openness to its many dimensions. The essay is both a defense of classical principles and a call for intellectual flexibility. He believes that by combining Aristotle's systematic approach with modern insights, critics can better appreciate poetry's power to imitate life, provoke thought, and elevate the human spirit. The essay's lasting message is that art thrives when we engage it on its own terms using all the tools philosophy, history, and close reading provide.